Good evening all, and welcome. Tonight, we are going to be staying at a particularly creepy hotel for a variety of reasons I'm sure you're about to find out. If you'd like to receive some or all of the perks you see on screen, feel free to check out my Patreon page, which can be found in the description. It really helps me out. Thanks, guys. Without further ado, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I used to be a duty manager at a 250-bed hotel in the UK. It was built on the seafront in 1828. I would often sit with the girls on the front desk in the evenings if I wasn't busy, mostly because they were nice, and also because the place, despite being beautiful, was creepy as hell at night. The elevator would often ding, open up, and go up and down and stop by itself. It was always perfect when the engineer came to look at it though. There were often reports from guests that a dog was running in the halls, always the same description, and it would disappear. Someone came down from their room telling us a man was there, and we had to send someone up to make sure. They switched rooms. New waiting staff would often approach a woman in the dining hall looking out to sea, for her to disappear before they got to her. Part of my job was to do the security/fire checks. I had to tour the building's dark basements with a flashlight. In the basement, there are arched rooms that were once used for storage linens, cleaning materials and foods. They looked like empty little prison cells now. Luckily, the maintenance men would escort me around most nights. It was spooky. I've been a hotel night auditor for 8.5 years without much trouble. The hotel where I work, night auditors always work alone, unless we were training someone new. We always lock our front entrance automated doors at midnight. One night around 1 a.m. a guy comes to the door. I called the entrance phone and ask how I can help him. He says that he needs to rent a room, so I buzz him in. He comes to the counter and asks the rate. When I tell him the price, he asks if he can use the restroom. He comes back and insists he needs water. I tell him where the faucet is, which is right next to the restroom that he just used. By this time, I think he's gonna rob me. I feel like telling him just to rob me to get it over with, and he comes back from getting water and asks if he can use the phone. He can't work the hotel phone because you have to dial 9 for an outside line, and that confuses him. So I dial the number for him, and my hands are shaking so badly that I have to try and dial it a few times. Instead of asking him the number, I write it down, and when I finally get it right, there's no answer on the other line. Then, this guy leaves. I swear to myself that I will not open the doors for anyone else tonight. And around 4 a.m. a different guy comes to the door and asks if he can use the phone. I'm not opening it for anyone, so I ask the number and I go to call it, and I realize it's the same number the first guy gave me. I can only see one person standing in front of all the glass doors, but I hear someone coughing, and it's not the guy I'm talking to. I know something is up, and instead of calling the number, I call the cops. 5 minutes later, 2 cop cars pull up. The first guy runs into the woods, and the second guy is still in the entrance, unable to run. The cop comes in to let me know what's going on. Earlier that night, there was a big fight at a trailer park down the road, and these guys were involved, and the police have been looking for them all night. People were hurt pretty bad because of these guys. The 2 guys had to get away and had no phone, so they were trying to make a call for a ride out of town. If they would have been upfront with me from the beginning about needing to use the phone instead of freaking me out, they might have gotten away. When I was 8, my entire family moved from San Diego County to the middle of nowhere in Colorado. After less than 2 years of being there and having to put up with the ridiculous weather, my oldest brother decided he's finally had enough. He got his GED and left his ferrets behind for us to take care of them, since they're illegal in California, and headed west to move in with a friend. Or at least he tried to. He didn't even make it 5 hours before his car completely died because it couldn't handle driving through the Rockies. He was stranded in a tiny podunk town after dark, and his car got towed to a garage while the tow truck driver offered to drive him to a cheap but nice motel to spend the night, since we couldn't get to him until the next day. They passed by a Motel 6 or some other chain motel like that, but the driver said, "Ugh, I wouldn't leave my dog in a place like that. There's a way nicer motel just down the road for the same price," and kept driving until they showed up at this really run-down looking place. My brother thought it looked pretty bad, but he's kind of a shy and non-confrontational person. He's also scrawny and completely unintimidating, so he didn't say anything and just thanked the guy. He couldn't see it at night, but when my mum and I got there the next day, we realized just how weird the place was. They had a big pool right smack in the middle of the parking lot, but it was drained dry and looked like it had never been used. The entire family that owned the place, mom, dad, daughter and son, sat on plastic lawn chairs in between the pool and the building, facing the motel rooms all day long. Then we saw the inside of his room. The bathroom had a small window, which isn't unusual, but it was only 2 feet off the ground and next to the toilet, with nothing covering it or obstructing the view of anyone using the toilet, meaning anyone outside, like the owners, could watch you doing your business. There wasn't even a spot for a toilet paper holder, so the roll just had to sit on a shelf, and the whole room looked pretty run down. My brother then quietly told us he barely got any sleep the night before, because he was so terrified. At first, we assumed it was just because he was sleeping in a strange place alone, when he was only 17, but he pointed out a door near his bed. His room was the kind where it's connected to the room next to it by a hallway only a few feet long, with a door in each room. So large families staying in adjacent rooms can keep it open and get between the two without having to deal with keys. He said he heard a faint noise coming from the next room to his the night before, so we opened the door to see what was going on, and there was enough of a gap underneath to see that someone was standing right on the other side of the far door. My brother watched for a few minutes, and the guy's shadow never shifted, so he got creeped out and closed his own door, making sure to lock it, and went to bed. He woke up at some point to a strange sound and sat there trying to identify it for a minute before he suddenly realized it was a doorknob rattling. The guy had finally opened his own door and was trying to get into my brother's room. The sound stopped after a few minutes, but he was too scared to fall back asleep in case the guy tried again and picked the lock. And he was just telling us this story quietly, in case the guy could hear him through the walls. He never saw what he looked like, but who knows if the guy watched him while he checked into the room or something. I have no idea what he was planning on doing to my brother, but I'm sure it wasn't good. Add this to the strange, frustrating conversation my mum had with the owner of the hotel over the phone on the drive up, and the weird-ass mechanic shop the car was towed to, and the town became one of the creepiest places we'd ever had the misfortune of stopping in. It would have cost more to fix the car than it was actually worth, so we just abandoned it, and my brother had to come home again, which he was actually happy to do after such a freaky experience. This happened 2 years ago, when I had just finished high school. I was 18 at the time, and I was not the most popular girl in my school. However, I did not go completely unnoticed. I'm mentioning this to you because I'm attractive as a female, and I do work out occasionally. I'm half Hispanic, half Caucasian, have light fair skin and dark black hair. I'm only telling you this so that you have an idea of what I look like. The thing is, I didn't have any friends. I have trust issues, which is a story for another time. I wasn't that close to my family either, so most of my social life and interactions were online. In my social life, I communicated with mostly cute guys in my city. Preferably, I only talked to younger guys, and if they were not in my city, I didn't reply because I didn't have a car. This also means that when I would go out on dates, these guys would have to pick me up. Most of my dates were nothing serious. It was mostly fun and games, but I did eventually want a relationship. Eventually, I came upon this Facebook message from this guy with a simple greeting. "Hi, how are you?" He seemed completely normal. He was not the most attractive guy that I would normally go out with, but something about him caught my attention, and I couldn't really describe it. You know that feeling when they might feel like they're the one, even if you've never met them? I do believe that I was destined at one point to cross paths with my potential soulmate, so I decided to give this guy a shot. His name was Tyler, and looking at his Facebook profile, he was pretty slender but fit. He had fair white freckled skin, and his hair was ginger, which I also really liked about him. I had a thing for gingers. After reviewing his profile, which I'm sure everyone does before replying to someone they don't know, I decided to respond to Tyler and get to know him a little more. We eventually got into a conversation and we shared some similarities. After a week of conversation, we both decided it was time to meet in person. I was not conflicted about meeting Tyler in person because I had nothing else going on. I was not working yet and I had just finished high school, so I had a lot of free time on my hands. The day we decided to meet came around, and Tyler already knew about my situation of not having a car, so he had planned on picking me up, and I decided to wear a cute, short black dress with a sweater over it, because it was slightly chilly outside, and I kept my long black hair straight and wore a little makeup. Sooner than later, the time Tyler was supposed to pick me up was here. It was around 9 p.m., which was the time we agreed he'd come to get me. But Tyler wasn't outside my house yet. He told me that he would be driving a black minivan, but I didn't see any black cars outside my house. It was getting late. An hour had passed, and Tyler didn't respond to any of my messages, though I could see they were all read. I was about to call it off when I got a notification from my phone. Tyler said he was finally here. I was annoyed of how long he took to arrive. However, my excitement was stronger, so I decided to put my shoes on and head out. Tyler was outside the car and greeted me. I looked at him, and I noticed he was underdressed than I was. He wore an orange hoodie and sweatpants, and I felt a bit embarrassed and thought I should have wore something more comfortable. I walked over to hug him, and he opened the door for me. Before I went inside, though, I noticed that there were 2 people inside the car. There was a guy in the driver's seat and a female in the passenger seat. Alarms were going off in my head right away, But before I could do anything, Tyler escorted me in the car. Tyler then joins me in the back seat, and I was frightened to say the least, but I didn't know what this was yet, and Tyler never mentioned there would be people joining us. From the moment I got in, I wanted to leave. I noticed Tyler's appearance to be a bit older than he'd looked on Facebook. He was still attractive but looked tired, like he hadn't slept in a while. He never spoke one word to me inside the car either, which made me feel uneasy. All he did was wink at me several times on the ride, wherever we were going. We eventually pulled up to a motel, and I had an idea where this was going but wasn't sure yet. Everyone got out the car, and I was the last to leave. The others started to make their way to the motel, and Tyler grabbed my hand and made our way behind them. When we got inside the motel room, I noticed right away a girl passed out on the bed. I knew she was just sleeping though. Everyone got settled into the room, and I did my best to play along because I did not want to give off a vibe that alarmed everyone that would be trouble. As soon as a conversation was going, I found out that the girl from the passenger seat was Tyler's sister. She had glasses and was slightly overweight, and she looked a bit like Tyler. She also hadn't slept in days. Her name was Shelby, and I think the guy driving was the boyfriend of the girl asleep on the bed, as he was trying to tell us to be quiet. Tyler was still looking at me with these predatory eyes, like he hadn't been with a woman in a while, and Shelby was talking with the other guy who I didn't know the name of yet. It was not soon after that I realized I was in trouble. I saw drugs being taken out of a bag that they had on them, with more drugs hidden around the motel room. I knew it would be more difficult to get out of this situation now, but I had to keep a brave face on because if I showed any signs of weakness, I'd be done for. Throughout this entire time being here, which felt like hours, Tyler eventually looked away from me to take out this glass pipe and a lighter. I could only describe this substance he was smoking to be meth. I'd never done drugs before, so I was frightened by the sight but kept a cool face. I was quiet the entire time, and then the other guy caught on because he asked Tyler why I was so quiet. Tyler shrugged, and then asked me the dreaded question, "Would you like to smoke this, babe?" I didn't know how to respond to that. I was shocked and scared. My mind began racing with so many thoughts. It took me a few short seconds to say, "Yeah, sure. Thanks, babe." I decided to play this out as smartly as I could. I thought if I played along, I could sneak out somehow while everyone was caught off guard. Besides, in a situation like this, you have to think on your feet and be smart. If I'd have said no, I can imagine different scenarios of me not making it through the night. So playing this out, I waited for Tyler to finish smoking the pipe until it was my turn. After watching him for a few seconds, it was my turn. Tyler passed me the pipe. I hesitantly lit it and began to inhale the smoke. I wasn't sure if I did it right, but didn't care. I must not have smoked enough though, because Tyler continually persisted me to take longer breaths. He walked over towards me and held the pipe for me so I could try it again. I coughed the first several times, and the others looked at me. They must have noticed that it was my first time doing this, but I hoped that they would think it had been a while for me. Tyler took the pipe after I was done so that he could continue, and it wasn't soon after that I began to feel lightheaded. I was starting to feel symptoms I'd never experienced before. My heart began racing faster, and my vision began to widen, as I could now notice little details in the room that I couldn't before. I had butterflies in my stomach, but not the bad kind. I meant the really good kind, when you're experiencing your first kiss and the fireworks. I felt amazing, and that scared me. I wanted to leave then, but I had to keep my composure. It was really hard now, because they enhanced my fear and paranoia. Sitting the entire time there didn't make the situation any easier. Tyler then said to me, "Hey babe, you okay?" "Yeah, I'm fine. I just have to use the bathroom." I didn't really have to use it. I just had to move around. I didn't know if it had been what I had taken, or myself, or both. Tyler walked me over and led me to the bathroom at the end of the room, which was next to the door outside the motel. I thanked him and walked in, and attempted to lock the bathroom by first instinct, but there was no lock. I panicked a little and tried to think a way out of this little motel room. Suddenly, an idea. I could fake a phone call from someone I knew off my Facebook Messenger and see who was online. Maybe they could pick me up and get me out of here. It was the best idea in my head, so I went along with it and proceeded to pester anyone I knew who I thought could take me home. I asked several guys who seemed nice enough with the same message, explaining a short version of the situation. Most of them responded with, "Call 911. Some didn't answer. Luckily though, a very sweet guy responded to me asking for my location. I didn't hesitate and sent him my location straight away. His name was Kyle, and he looked around the same age as me, so I felt safe. After sending him my location, he sent me a message saying that he'd be there in 5 minutes. I was very happy that he wasn't that far, and I replied to his message saying thank you. I wasn't sure if I knew Kyle personally, but he did seem familiar. All I know is I had to find someone in my city on my Facebook friends list who was online and could somehow take me away from these junkies. And I did, so that was taken care of. Now all I had to do was find a way to explain to Tyler why I had to leave. I flushed the bathroom toilet, and even though I didn't use it, I washed my hands. I exited and noticed Shelby and the guy leaving the room. I saw Tyler continue to smoke the glass pipe, walked over to him, and took the time to think of a reason to tell him why I had to leave as he continued smoking. Thinking fast on my feet, I thought of stupid explanations to escape. After he finished his pipe, he looked at me and said, "Feeling all better, baby? You took a while, so I got worried. My sister and Vince went to grab snacks for us, so they left really quick to the gas station." I replied back saying, "Sorry about that, just been having lady problems. And is that the guy's name, Vince?" "Yeah, that's Vince. He's stolen from us before, so we're hanging out with him, pretending to like him." I hesitantly replied, asking, "Oh, what did he steal from you?" "He stole my sister's car and never returned it, so we're keeping him real close. You know what I'm saying? Keep your friends close and your enemies closer." I chuckled to Tyler softly, pretending to agree with him. I then had a bright idea to make an excuse to leave. "Hey Tyler, I have to check on my big brother. He said he'd be picking me up tonight and I have to see when he's coming to get me." He looked annoyed when I told him this, but I didn't care. I went on my phone and tried to call Kyle, who I messaged earlier, and he picked up after the first ring and told me he was there. I told him I'd be 2 minutes. I walked back over to Tyler, made an excuse how he's earlier than expected, and why I had to go. He stood up, glass pipe in hand, and told me that I wasn't leaving. I felt sick. As he said that, I wanted to throw up. I kept my composure, however, because I didn't think he would hurt me with someone else in the room, even if that person was a petite and passed out. I firmly told him, "Okay, let me run downstairs to the parking lot and tell him that I'm fine staying with you tonight." I grabbed his hand as I said this in the hopes that he would believe the lie. He looked conflicted about what I was saying, but agreed to let me walk outside to my fake brother Kyle from Facebook, who was saving me. Tyler watched me walk outside the motel room, and I could feel his eyes piercing behind my back. Even though I couldn't see him, I definitely felt it. I glanced behind me when I was going down the stairs to the parking lot to see if I was being followed. Fortunately, he wasn't, So I took that opportunity and dashed to find Carl's car. I didn't care if he heard me running to the parking lot in front of the motel as fast as I could. But then I panicked. I never asked Kyle which kind of car he drove. So I looked at every car until I saw anyone with their lights on. I then saw a car drive up to me, stop and roll down their window. It was Kyle. He opened the passenger seat and I immediately got inside. He looked worried, but I told him to just drive out of there, and he agreed. He seemed spooked by my reaction, and I didn't seem to like the area I was in either. So he drove out of there in a flash. But with my adrenaline acting like crazy, and paranoia from what I'd been taking, I kept glancing behind me, making sure we weren't being followed. But Kyle assured me we were safe. Eventually I felt safe enough and told Kyle everything. He looked shocked by my responses, and he told me he was glad he could help me out. I told him again how grateful I was that he was there to pick me up, and he explained to me that he was glad to help a lady out if someone needed it. It was then that I found out Kyle wasn't just a stranger, but he was a date that I'd went out on a while ago from the Plenty of Fish dating app. Kyle was also a soldier who lived on a base in my area, and that made me feel safe. Once he arrived at my home, he told me to be careful with who I met up with. I hugged him, thanked him, and blocked Tyler on Facebook. I wasn't worried about Tyler knowing where I lived, because at the time a sheriff lived across from me, and Tyler knew about it too, because when he came to pick me up earlier that night, he looked around the neighborhood to see a sheriff's car across from my house. But the sheriff's car's lights weren't on, of course, which is why Tyler probably didn't get spooked right off the bat. But he did ask me earlier that night if I was the sheriff's daughter later on in the motel room. Only now do I wish I'd had said yes. I was always cautious from time to time living in my neighborhood, because he did know my address, and it wasn't until I moved that I felt safe again. To this day, I'm always careful of who I meet up with and where I'm going. And to Tyler and his junkie pals, get help, and let's not meet again. Just about 20 minutes ago, this happened to me. I'm running express checkouts and playing Pokemon Go, so I'm walking kind of slow through the hotel. I had a lot of notes about disruptive rooms, so I was trying to stay quiet to listen in order to hear people being rowdy. I'm rounding the corner on the second floor and see an older man dressed in black pants, shoes, long sleeve shirt, and seemed to be elderly, but I only saw his white hair from the back. He was walking in the opposite direction towards the staircase at the end of the hall really slowly, which led me to believe he was even more elderly than I thought. I really didn't want to talk to him because it's 2:30 in the morning and it's quiet hours, so I slowed my pace a little bit. I only had one more room to give the express checkout, so I got down near the end of the hall and slipped it under the door. I was close enough that I could see into the stairwell, so both up and down the staircases. I was about 3 doors down, not far at all, and I noticed him standing just outside the doorway. As I got closer, he started moving to go upstairs, so I figured he heard me, or saw me, and was also feeling antisocial. I was going downstairs, so no harm in walking at normal speed. I got to the last section of the doors, and he's walking very slowly up the stairs. He was only on the 4th or 5th step, and I get closer to the door to the stairwell, and then it slams shut. I jump, because not only was it loud and unexpected, but also our doors have the thing on top that slows it down so it doesn't slam. My reflexes kicked in. I rush to open the door and see what's going on, with about 5 to 10 seconds max between all of this happening. I open the door, and the man is nowhere to be found. I look up the staircase and there wasn't a guy in sight. I got to the first landing to investigate more, and I see the guy turn the corner at the opposite end of the hall, a good 40 to 50 yards at the other end. There's no human way possible for someone to get to the bottom of the staircase on the second floor, all the way to the opposite end of the hall on the next floor up in the few seconds it took me to see him. Even if it wasn't an elderly man, it's still impossible, and I would have heard footsteps if he were running. He even turned the corner, still walking very slowly. My hair is standing on end. I just hope for the sake of the guests that he's not some evil spirit or something. Freaked me right out. I live in a seaside town in southern Australia, one that has been settled by Europeans for over 100 years. There are plenty of alleged haunted places here and there, and I have seen and felt a few things myself. The scariest thing that happened to me was when I went to a hotel. It's been investigated by paranormal groups, and there is even a book about haunted places around southern Australia in which the hotel features. There is the story that a little girl was killed, run over by a horse and cart in the late 19th century. There's also the story of the young boy who ended his own life because of his cruel parents, and I believe I experienced the presence of this boy. I'd felt some spirits in that place, and I was pretty certain I could sense the boy. Anyway, I went home without thinking too much about it, but later on is when it became interesting. That night, I got up late to use the bathroom. There was soft moonlight shining through the glass sliding door on my way in, and my way back from the lavatory to the bedroom, I saw a figure standing in the room. It looked as solid as a living person, but had its back to me. It was the form of a young boy, and I immediately knew what I was looking at and was both shocked and surprised. I was extremely scared and worried. I chose to be a coward, to rush past the figure and pretended I never noticed it. I quickly did what most people do and hid under my covers. I had never seen a spirit look so realistic or so solid before. There is also a less frightening experience I had in a local tattoo studio. This building was once a bank some years ago, and the building is over 100 years old. There was some other business in it prior to the studio moving there, but I don't recall what it was. One day while getting a tattoo myself, I was talking to the tattoo artist when I heard a female voice, except there were no other females there at the time. I also felt a decidedly feminine energy, and I asked the tattooist if the building had a spirit in it, and if it was a female. He confirmed to both questions, and next I felt someone brush the top of my head as I was having my tattoo done. I thought my 9-year-old son had touched my head, as he was there waiting for me to take him out to the playground, instead of spending several hours watching me get a tattoo. Turns out no one had touched me. That's when I knew it had to have been the female spirit. These were not the first times I have been touched by a spirit, or heard one or saw one. Until 1997, I had no idea a spirit had the ability to physically touch someone, until it happened to me. I love going to old places with history. You just have to be careful sometimes. You never know when a spirit might decide to follow you home. This happened in early 2017. I was a 23-year-old girl and had just finished college. The field I studied was not huge in my area, so I knew I had to leave it, and I moved to the biggest city in my country in order to pursue a post-grad course and look for a job. As I was still unemployed, I thought I would wait to make a long-term rental contract, worrying about a bad commute to work. In the first few months, I was switching between Airbnbs and hostels all the time. I was tired of this, and decided this would be my last move, and then, with or without a job, I would settle. I was already running out of money, and decided to stay in a dorm in a hostel next to where I was taking classes. Sharing a bedroom is not a problem with me during a trip, but when you're living somewhere trying to create a routine and have some privacy, sharing a bathroom with complete strangers just sucks. I would share the dorm with 3 guys, but it's not with any of them my bad encounter was. They were nice, apart from them snoring badly at night. In another dorm, however, was the creepiest person I'd ever met. He was in his mid-30s and not traveling. He was a native from the city we were in and was using the hostel as a new house since his parents kicked him out of theirs. He introduced himself and tried to be nice and flirty. I was polite, but declined his interest. He wouldn't stop. He started following me all day long inside the hostel. Anywhere I went, he would show up in less than 5 minutes. On my second day there, I left the hostel to a job interview, and by the time I arrived late into the night, he was sitting alone in the front stair waiting for me. He told me I was the most beautiful thing on earth, and that he would buy me snacks, ask me out, and try to get information about my personal life. All the while, I had made it very clear that I wasn't interested. This happened in 3 days. I was already exhausted of his presence, but what I didn't know is that it would get worse. As soon as one of the guys that was sharing the dorm with me left, he asked hostel staff to switch dorms and stay in the same as me. Obviously, he never told me. So imagine how surprised and disgusted I was when I saw him coming to the dorm with all his belongings. I was so afraid of his presence that I kept sleeping with jeans on to avoid any sort of terrible situation. The very next morning, I knew I had to go. The situation had exponentially gone worse, and I couldn't handle it anymore. While I was packing, this guy showed up, noticed what I was doing and started to cry, asking me not to leave him. Then, to make things more creepy and disgusting, he told me he would miss seeing my face when I was asleep, and that he would have to take photos. I was trying my best to be chill about this, but I lost it when he told me he had taken pictures of me sleeping. I took his phone out of his hand and asked to see the pictures and delete them all. There was a bunch of me sleeping in the night before, and I left the hostel and really regretted not reporting him to the staff. I hope to never meet this creep again. When I was in middle school, I convinced my parents that for summer vacation we should go to a haunted hotel. So we went to the Menga Hotel in San Antonio. Well, for the first visit, I videotaped walking through the hotel with my dad and best friend. I didn't catch anything except a loud bang while we were rounding a corner, a girl whimper, and someone say, "You get down." Since then, I can't find the video, but while we walked through there, dead silence like you wouldn't expect walking through hotel hallways. Me and my best friend also ran up and down the halls late at night and heard people running above us on the 3rd floor. Excited, we ran up to see who was there, and there was no one. A security guard had actually come around the second time, and we met this really chilled out lady taking photos, and she covered for us. But the lady and I got into a really interesting conversation, and she told us that her daughter and herself were mediums, and that every night at the foot of her and her husband's bed, there was a little boy standing there. She was really sweet, and told her about what we had been experiencing, and never saw her on the trip again. Finally, we came back home, and I entered my room to see one of my frames on the wall fell and shattered. The next morning I woke up, but I felt a hand at the foot of my bed. It was hard enough to wake me, and I knew I felt it by my feet. I remember once I woke up right before 10 and asked if it wouldn't wake me up. It never did after that. I thought I might be going a little crazy, but my dog was sleeping with me on the bed one night and jolted awake with me the following morning. It was never creepy because that was the extent of the paranormal I would say followed me home. It went away after I complained about it to my friend over the phone. To take things back to the beginning, at the time of this, I was 14. I was a competitive dancer, and with that came a lot of traveling and a lot of stays in hotels. On this particular trip, we were going to Fargo, North Dakota. We would be there for 5 days, so we needed to find a reasonably priced hotel, but was also obviously safe. Me, my mum, my best friend Beth, and Beth's mum were going to carpool the 4 hours to Fargo and stay in the same hotel room. We made the 4-hour drive and pulled up to our days inn we had booked. Everything went as normal. My mum and Beth's mum checked in while Beth and I sat in the locked car. Once our mums came back with our room keys, we got our suitcases and made our way up to our room. We were on the 2nd floor, and being in the city for a dance competition, we had tons of luggage. To our disadvantage, there was no elevator in the hotel, only a tiny flight of winding stairs. Let me just explain the layout of this hotel. When we walked into the hotel doors, the check-in desk was to our right, and 2 couches sitting opposite each other were on the left. Straight in front of the entrance doors was the door to the pool, going past the check-in desk. You could turn left or right to get to the main floor hotel rooms. At the end of each hallway to your left was the staircase I mentioned earlier. Getting back to the story, we walked into the hotel and took a right at the check-in desk, and we were going to the end of the hall and up the stairs, our luggage clunking behind us. Once we made it up the stairs, our hotel room was halfway down the hall to the left. We approached our room, and as Beth's mum tried to use our keycard to open the wood door, the light on the door that would usually turn green, saying we could enter, turned red, meaning that our car was not activated properly. So Beth's mum went back to the front desk to get a new card. Me, my mum, and Beth waited outside our room joking and laughing about how our trip was off to such a great start, when a shorter, skinny, balding man approached us. He looked to be in his late 20s to early 30s. He approached us and said to my mum, "Where did you get your tattoos?" My mum at the time only had a couple of smaller, less noticeable ones, so you'd really have to be staring at her in order to see them. My mum goes, "Just a friend who does them back home." He then told us all that if we were interested, we could go into his room, and he motioned to it, and said that he can give us all some new ink. Obviously, we politely declined, and my mum told the man that we were only 14. He mumbled to himself and went back to his room. Just as he entered his room, Beth's mum came back and asked who that guy was. We explained the conversation, and then totally forgot as we entered our room. Later that day, we decided to go out and eat at a small restaurant that was a 10-minute drive from our hotel. I was the first one to exit the room, and at the end of the hallway across from the stairs was the same man sitting on the windowsill looking outside. I kind of gave my mum the look. You know, the look when you don't want to draw attention to yourself by directly pointing or saying, "Look over there." She casually looked, and we gathered up enough courage to walk down the hall towards the stairs. As we approached him, I came upon the shocking realization that he was giggling to himself and carving something into the window with a knife. I let out a small gasp as he turns to me and gently stroked the blade. Me, Beth, and our mums booked it down the stairs and ran to the front desk to alert the guy who was working there. He didn't seem to care, but he told us he would look into the matter. Mine and Beth's mum stood at the desk talking to the man, while I asked Beth's mum for the keys so that Beth and I could sit in there safely. She unlocked the doors to the vehicle, and I called Beth to follow me. She was texting her boyfriend and told me to just wait up for her. Our mums had just finished talking to the guy, so we were all standing in the doorway waiting for Beth, when I turn around and noticed the man standing directly behind Beth. I grabbed her arm and told her that we needed to go. She kept resisting and saying she needed to respond to her boyfriend before we left because she wouldn't have Wi-Fi at the restaurant. Finally, I screamed at her to get off her phone and we sprinted to the car and got in. We made the drive to the restaurant and Beth and I were hysterical. Once we got there, we called the hotel to tell them we weren't staying there and we wanted a refund. The manager was reluctant and asked us to come back so we could talk about the situation. I don't know why, but we went back, gathered all of our belongings as fast as we could, throwing whatever we could fit in whichever bag was closest. Beth's mum was so freaked out she was throwing up heavily in the bathroom. I don't know when the police were called, but as we exited our room, the man's door was open a crack and an older woman sat there. I think she was trying to calm down the creepy man. I peeked in and saw 3 big trash bags under his bed and weapons sitting on the little table across from it. Again, being the idiot that I am, I gasped and the 2 people in the room turned around. We quickly ran downstairs with all of our stuff and went to a new hotel, and a very expensive one at that. The front desk worker at Days Inn was just a part-time guy, and his shift had just started. He'd got thrown into the situation and ended up being the one we spoke to about our refund, since we hadn't even stayed the night there. He gave us our money back and said something along the lines of, "This should never happen, and I know my boss won't want me to refund your stay, but this is unacceptable, and if they want to fire me for helping you guys out, so be it." God bless that guy, and I hope he knows what a godsend he was at that moment. Honestly, I'm glad we got out of there when we did, because I don't want to know what his intentions were when he got us into his room, and it haunts me every day, not knowing what was in those 3 garbage bags under his bed. I'm just happy that we all made it out alive. We were staying in a historic home in the old girls' wing in room number 6. I was around 11 and had not been told this house was haunted. There was only one other family staying in the whole house, as it was huge, and they were on a totally opposite wing on the ground floor. There were stairs on the floor above us in the main house, and at around 11 p.m. someone started running up and down them over and over. Everyone was asleep, and exactly at midnight, I heard a little girl speak. It sounded like she was in the room with us, but I have no idea what the voice was saying, but she repeated a phrase 3 times. Being scared to death, I called my mum and she immediately woke up and heard the voice too. Then my brother and I woke up, and he and I both heard a chair in the room squeaking, like someone was bouncing up and down on it. Also in the middle of the night, my brother woke up on the floor, as if someone had pushed him from the bed. I found out later the family of the house had a young daughter who died tragically, and to this day, I still cannot sleep in old homes. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's hotel stories. If you did, don't forget to do the like and comment, subscribe, and all the good stuff. If you would like to have your name on screen, like all my amazing patrons do right now, feel free to check out my Patreon. You have a whole load of awesome rewards that you can get for signing up, and as little as $1 a month will help keep things going for me over here, and it is of course tremendously appreciated. So, with that being said, if there's a story you'd like to share, don't forget to forward it to my email or send it to my Reddit. Either are fine. So, for now, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.